Hey everybody, welcome to Go Live with Glow. Tonight we have a very special guest. We have Yaribel Mercedes coming on tonight. She already let everybody know on her page what she's coming here to talk about. If anybody sees anything that they like, or not even see, if anyone hears anything that they like, drop a diamond underneath here, because sis told y'all to get y'all notebook and a pen because she was going to be dropping gems the whole night. I feel like my t-shirt tonight is very appropriate for the conversation. I believe I got this shirt from a friend of mine's Instagram pages. Don't quote me, Brooklyn Braids. I'm definitely going to tag it later on tonight. Yaribel, you are on time. Let the room warm up first, because nobody is here yet, and I want to make sure everybody hears what you have to say. I'm gonna just go ahead and let Yaribel get in the booth, because Yaribel about to spit some real knowledge for everybody to hear. So I'm gonna wait until at least 8:01 for people to start joining, so people won't miss the first half of the conversation. I don't really know why people come here at 8:05. I don't really know. We start at 8 o'clock and the conversation gets going at 8 on the dot. But you know what? We're going to go there right now. Let me go ahead and invite Yaribel on here. Hi.
Hey, sis.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, because I don't have my AirPods. I was told that the AirPods are messing up the connection with the IG Live. So I just don't have it on, but I just know it makes it sound a little weird sometimes. But I think it'll be good. You see how they got this new thing on here now for the live? We could add another person.
Yeah, we could call on people. Maybe if people have questions, maybe they could join us. Who knows? We may have to vet them first.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm a little nervous about that. I don't know.
By the way, I love your shirt.
Thank you.
Answer.
Thank you.
Yes.
I wore it for tonight. I even have a little chain that says love. I said, I'm going to do this for Yaribel, because I know that's the center of the conversation. I'm going to just literally, if we was in the studio, I would just let you get in the booth right now. I want everybody to kind of get in the booth, right? Get in the booth and just go ahead and spit something for everybody. But
I know that's right. Listen, my hubby, I be telling him I'm a rapper, but when I rap, he's really the rapper. But when I rap, he says I'm like an 80s rapper, because I'm always like, yeah. But maybe my different
quality. You gotta get the beat going. You gotta spit.
I think I just spit in a different way and preach in a different way right now. So, but yeah, that's funny that you say that. By the way, I love our synergy with our red lip.
Yeah, right. We were really listening. I was like, I'm not going to do too much tonight, because last week's episode was a little bit spicy. So I was like, what, let me go ahead and take it in another direction.
And by the way, brother was brilliant.
Yes, very intellectual, right? Learned a lot. We need a lot of healing in the community. So I want to go ahead and just do a soft intro on who you are. So, because I was trying to let the room warm up, but it's enough people in here. So we have Yaribel Mercedes. I pronounced it correct, right?
So so we'll talk about that a little bit too during my my little go off session. But I assimilated my name for 33 years as Yaribel, which is the English pronunciation, but the real pronunciation is Yaribel. So the Y is pronounced like a J, and the I is pronounced like an E, because it's written as if the Spanish language wrote it. So Yaribel.
Okay, so why do you allow people to pronounce it?
That's very important. I went 33 years mispronouncing my name because of what whiteness and white supremacy does to us, that we do not want to make others uncomfortable. So, we make ourselves small, and we'll say, we'll go for it, so that we don't have to correct people. But I'm glad that we had this moment, because my friends know me as Yaribel. I met my hubby as Yaribel. That's the way that I said my name was. But I'm reclaiming my name, so it's Yaribel.
Hello. So you are actually a BC alum, correct?
Go Eagles. Where my Eagles at?
So you are literally the 5th BC alum that I have interviewed. I clearly have a BC connect. That's
It's
why I've been
magic.
able to pull all you guys to let us know about your, PWC experience, and let us know about what that was about. So go ahead and just tell us a little bit of history about you.
So a little bit about me, born and raised Washington Heights. Grew up in the Bronx too. My mom was first to buy a house, so I also rep Castle Hill. And I am a Black woman. I am a Dominican woman. I am a mother. I am a daughter. I am a sister. I am a granddaughter. And a little bit about me is, yes, Zakia is the plug. Z is one of my bestest friends of life, one of the closest people in my life. She was one of my safe havens at BC. We know that Boston College. So the reason why we have that connection is Zakia was my roommate. I actually was Zakia's residential assistant, RA, as a sophomore. Here I am, an RA for freshmen. Now, we was lit. We had a vibe, all the Black folks, in our corner. I'm like, yeah, just y'all gotta work with me, we gotta work
right,
together.
right. Please, don't be grilled at your George Foreman after a certain hour because I don't want to be held accountable, but I do want a hamburger.
Exactly.
Make mine extra crispy.
Right. And it was awesome because as an RA, you get your own room.
Right.
So, as we developed relationships, like my room was actually the cool room. Like nobody wasn't trying to not be near me. Actually, the crew wanted to be always with me. So that was awesome. And we were just a community, man. Boston College is a predominantly white institution. And we just had to find folks that, we're in the plight together. Black women, Black men, in a predominantly white institution that often reinforces that, we are not enough. And I think that we showed up and showed out in BC. And then I went on, I started working in business for AT&T. And then I realized after I had my son that I wanted a career. And, I've always, since I was little, I always said I wanted to be a teacher.
Right.
It's something that I always kind of like with my dolls, I always played. And then after I had him, I just said, you know what, I'm going to go back to school. So I got my master's in education from Lehman College. And then after that, I went on for 10 years. I decided to go back for my leadership license. And I just recently graduated Columbia for school.
So what
and
is a
building
leadership license? What is
so
exactly?
The way that it works in education is you start off with your master's in education, which means your teaching position. And then if you want to move the ranks, so to speak, if you want to become a building administrator, you have to get an additional set of certification. Okay. So I went back for my second master's in school and building leadership, which means if you want to be a principal, if you want to be an assistant principal, if you want to be what I am, which is an educational administrator, then you go back for that certification. And I just most recently did that.
I did not know teachers went to school this much. I honestly don't think my teachers went to this much school. Like, I really think they got an associates in education and came to the public schools and was wreaking havoc on us as little kids. Like, I don't remember any of my teachers like, oh, I'm going back to school to get this, or I'm getting a master's in this, because I just don't remember that, honestly. I don't even know what the qualifications was back then to even be a teacher.
The qualifications are serious, and I don't think that people realize the amount of work that it takes to be a teacher. And then on the back end, I remember starting as a teacher at $44,000 a year. $44,000 a year after just graduating from Boston College, which a year the tuition was $40,000. And then, my master's. So all the time that you put in, and then that's where they start you off. I will say, I'm 13 years in the game, so things are a lot different. But yeah, teachers put in a lot of work, administrators put in a lot of work, and, oftentimes are not rewarded financially as such.
So let me ask you a question. Why did you go to a predominantly, historically Black college?
So for me, I think that that's a great question. Like, you often, the mirrors that you have in your life often dictate like how you navigate life, right? So my brother was first generation college, and he actually went to Boston College. And then my older second brother went to Cornell University.
Okay.
So when I was in high school, you know, I as the woman in my family, it was either like, where am I gonna go? Like, what's gonna be my space? What's gonna be the legacy that I start? And I was just so lucky to have my brother breaking, you know, barriers for us, going to Boston College, and then my brother Pops going to Cornell. And I just knew that Cornell was not my vibe. You know, my brother played ball, and we would go to Ithaca, I mean, every weekend. And I just knew Cornell was not it for me. And also the grades that, you know, I was not Cornell level.
Right.
So, you know, I loved BC. You know, there was something about it when I went. There was something about it, you know, as my brother was living there, that intrigued me. So I applied, and I applied to a lot of Boston schools. I applied to Northeastern, I applied to BC. But to answer your question, I think that oftentimes the mirror that you have in your life often dictate and create an example that you say, oh, you know, me, I didn't grow up knowing about historically Black colleges. You know,
Okay.
I was not in my consciousness that I am now to understand the power in that, you know. But I had my brother that sort of created this path, and I was just so happy that he created it so that I could follow it.
Z came to one of my homecomings. She came to one of my homecomings, and another one of our close friends came to the homecoming as well. Well, the last homecoming that we were able to go to due to COVID, and I'm so happy that I did go, and I'm happy that I went to homecoming every year, because who would have saw this happening? You know what I mean? There's so many people that plan to go, and I remember Z was like, "This is really fun." I'm like, "This was school every day. This was school every Monday and Wednesday and Friday. We got work done." Well, other people got work done, but
You
I
gotta
did
have
some
a
work
little
here and there.
fun. We had a
Oh,
lot of fun at BC. We had
yeah,
a lot of fun, but we had to get the work done.
I know. So you said that you weren't in a current state of consciousness as you are right now. So what state of consciousness are you in at this moment?
So I like to repeat, you know, Amanda Seales, she's so brilliant. She talks about a lot of people have had an eruption of consciousness. And I think that that for me happened while I was at Columbia, you know, and really having professors that centered critical race theory, that centered, you know, really talking about your racial identity. And I remember coming into Columbia and writing a racial identity statement where I never isolated my race. It's always like, oh, I'm Dominican, you know, I'm chocolate, I'm brown, I'm all these things, and not isolating, you know, because there's a lot of anti-Blackness in our culture. You're not Black, you're Dominican, as if there is a
Right.
hierarchy. So I grew up with that. You know, I grew up like, oh, I'm not Black because what Black meant to us was African American. And I wasn't African American, but I am Caribbean and I am Dominican and I am Black. But that's not something that we talked about. That's not something that Dominicans, you know, talked about. Actually, what Dominicans talked about is refining their race, you know, dating someone that was lighter skinned, you know, dating someone that was not Black. So I think that I'm so different in my level of consciousness now because I am so aware of how I was socialized in anti-Blackness, how I was socialized in trying to meet so deeply this proximity of whiteness and assimilating my name, you know, and straightening my hair, you know, and all of these things. And, you know, Columbia took me through a process, and not Columbia, the institution, but my professors, you know, Dr. Dina Simmons, who's been such a mentor to me. And I remember that class where I had the awareness about my name, and I
Right.
could not stop crying. I could not stop crying after that class because I realized so much hurt happens in schools that sort of reinforce this idea that you can't come into this being your whole self, right? So you have to assimilate to these structures that sort of strip you of all the things that make you magic, the nerve. Um, so I am such in a different place because I am literally working every day, examining how white supremacy and whiteness lives within me. you know, and that's just because of the way I was socialized, you know. And I have 2 children. I have a daughter and I have a son. And I'm constantly in my mind about what I'm reinforcing. You know, you talked about historically Black colleges, and I had this proud moment, you know, where my son has talked about Duke and my son has talked about Boston College, you know, because his mama went there. But the more we talk about race, the more we talk about real history, the more we talk about, you know, where our roots really originate from, I think that he's starting a level of consciousness at, you know, at 13, my daughter at 6 and 7 years old, that, you know, the other day he's like, how about going up a historically Black college? And I was just like, I'm doing the work, you know, I'm doing the work because there is some sense level of pride, you know, there.
Right. You know, a lot of people that went to historically Black colleges, that was their first time actually being in a predominantly Black school. I grew up in Harlem. All my friends was Black. I went to a Black elementary school. I went to a Black high school. I went to a Black college. But everybody had different experiences. You know what I mean? Like, everybody had all these different experiences. Some people were like, this is my first time being here around all these Black people. I went to a predominantly, you know, white school where I'm the only Black person here. And I think culturally, like I always said,
and you know what's
Black,
crazy?
are you culturally Black? Are you culturally Black?
You know what's crazy about that? You know, as being Dominican, like, you know, you have all these ranges of skin tone, right? So I grew up in Washington Heights. You know, I grew up in schools where I felt like everybody, we shared a similar experience, right? We're all predominantly Black, you know, Latinx, as people like to use that term. I don't like to use it, but we could get into it in a different time of this talk. But when I went to BC, that was the first time in my life that I realized that I was different. Because the questions that people would ask me is like, what are you? And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean, what am I? Like, I'm me. No, but where are you from?
Right.
Oh, I'm New York. No, but where? Like, where? And the question is like, you're not white, so what place do you come from? Like, where are you invading us from? You know, and then, you know, for somebody like me who's not chocolate and my hair is curly, you know, they were trying to, you know, trying to figure out, like, where did I come from? And the question that they asked me is, are you Cape Verdean? And me in my ignorance, I didn't know anyone from Cape Verde. You know, so I'm like, no, I'm Dominican. And they're like, Dominican, what's that? That was always the point of conversation for me at BC. And that's where I realized that there this othering that happened in predominantly white spaces, because I had never been in predominantly white spaces all of my schooling.
But those same conversations happen in Black circles too. You can't show up.
Can we talk about that?
You can't show up any other complexion and not be from somewhere else. I can't tell you how many times living in New York City. So where you from? Are you Black? Are you Black? I'm like, my mother's Black, my father's Black. So you don't have any Spanish in you? I don't have. Listen, I don't even know. Maybe somewhere down the line. And
ain't that something?
Even down to like, I think I had a conversation with this guy from like Nigeria, and he was like, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "I'm from Harlem." And so then we go into this again. He was like, "But like, where are your people from?" I'm like, Florida. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how far we
from here.
He was like, you know, you should do the 100 and me thing. I'm like, I'm really just not hell bent on spitting in the tube and figuring out how far we come from Nigeria, just because I'm just Black. He was like, oh, and I think I've had this conversation with so many Black people. Never really, I'm not in too many spaces with too many white people, honestly. But I've had this conversation with so many different types of Black people. I don't identify as African American. We're Native American. The Native Americans was here first. Okay, sir, goodbye. Like, I cannot. Like, I cannot, because it would seem as though those conversations would be had in our community, but there's so much more ignorance within our community than is outside of the community. Like, we have to educate those outside as well.
And the problem is that we're miseducated, right? We've been, you know, schooled in schooling institutions, you know, by curriculum of the oppressor, right? That that told our history. We didn't tell our history, right? So I've had a number of conversations where people are like, "You're not Black." And I understand it. And I say, I understand why you say that I am not Black. I understand the undertones of you saying that I'm not African American. No, I am not. You know, I am Caribbean, I am Dominican, but I am a Black woman. And I remember going into this webinar that Girl Trek had, where Angela Davis said, we have to be capacious about the way that we define Black women. Mm-hmm. Right? Because Black women are from all over the world. And right. I just thought that that was, you know, in terms of me doing the work, like, yes, we're not a monolith. You know, there's the Black experience in the United States of America. There's the Black experience of the world. You know, there's the Black experience that I'm still learning from the Dominican Republic and, you know, colonization there. You know, I was never privy to that history. I was never privy to what it really, what February 27th, we just had an Independence Day, right. But what that really meant for the Dominican Republic, you know, where it really wasn't independent for the Black folks in the Dominican Republic. So I'm still unlearning. And when I tell you I'm still doing the work of really understanding my real history, our real history, that right. has been what has catapulted to your question earlier, like my consciousness, because we were taught disconsciously right. from people that designed curriculum to keep us that way.
And so how does everything that you're doing right now, because you're unlearning a lot, right? And so you're an educator, correct?
Yes.
So what is the current state of schooling, institutions, and education? Like, I know you wanted to talk about that. So let me let you in the booth. Go ahead. Get in the booth.
So, I use the term schooling, you know, I remember being asked this question about the purpose of education, and a colleague that I was working alongside, she made a great point. She said, well, are you talking about schooling institutions or are you talking about education? And I thought that that was such a great point that she raised. It made me think that school is run as an institution. You know, schools are run as a business, so to speak. And also the way that schooling is to reinforce whiteness and white supremacy, right? Like in terms of uniforms, in terms of the way that students are policed for their behavior, in terms of, you know, tracking, in terms of creating hierarchical systems where there are grades. Somebody's going to get an A, which means that somebody's going to fail. All of these tenets of whiteness and white supremacy is what engulfs our schooling institutions. And I hope that my work, you know, as I continue to unlearn, as I continue to read the works of, you know, some of our brilliant ancestors and some of the people that are writing frameworks like Dr. Goldie Muhammad, like Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz, like some of my professors at Columbia, Dina Simmons, Terrence Green, that really are doing the work to sort of have us educators or administrators really investigate like how whiteness shows up in school, and how we have to also investigate anti-Blackness. You know, a lot of schooling institutions are, you know, sort of minimize everything that is magic about us. You know, like we are about the collective. We are about being expressive. We are about sharing ideas. And that's not how schooling institutions right now are working for our babies, especially for our Black, Indigenous, racialized students. So I have a hyper awareness about, you know, and I have a hyper awareness in terms of the work that I do, because we really have to be mindful about the policies and the structures sometimes that we are a part of, you know, and that we reinforce that end up being damaging to our babies. You know, I'm a mother of two, and I've already had so many incidents with my own kids that it also puts a battery in my back, because they're having experiences because of where I live, where it's predominantly white, right? And them being, you know, Black kids at the school. I remember my son last year, a white student gave him a book that was titled "Go to Prison," and told him, "Go to jail, black man." And you know, they were going to sweep it under the rug. They really were.
Absolutely not.
And they had the right parent, you know. And I'm glad that I'm also very grateful that I am in the work that I'm in terms of the work that I'm doing as far as learning, unlearning, and all of that, and the way I've been socialized, because I don't know if I would have been prepared 4 years ago to go up in that building. Like, excuse me, like, this needs to be escalated to the highest level. And they were really not trying to do anything. They almost tried to make it seem like he was the problem. Like it was a game, like that it was a game that they were playing, that it was funny. And I'm like, no.
What we're not gonna do is that. We're not
what
gonna
we're not gonna do.
What we're not gonna do is that. As much as I don't want this to be a problem, this is about to be a problem. Don't you dare say that to my child. And you know, it's crazy because, you know, I've been going on this rampage trying to get my daughter into private school. You know what I'm saying? Like trying to get her into private school, wanting her to have the opportunities that a lot of these, you know, predominantly private schools, you know, have. They have the ability to take their kids out of the country. These kids have a budget for when they're going to travel out the world, and they're going to be able to study and you know, have their hands on different types of opportunities, because I want the best for my child. We don't have those resources in the Black community at all. So what do we do as a community to make sure that we're able to provide that for our kids? I shouldn't have to take my daughter to a predominantly white school where she's not going to fit in hopes that she'll stand out and be a bigger and better person than she would have in a predominantly Black school.
Well, that's the problem right now with the system and like schooling institutions, right? Like I also went to private school because for my mom, she wanted access, right? And that's what we want for our babies. You know, we want access for the best. We want access for rich education. But honestly, and we know the resources that are going to those privatized institutions, right? But sometimes putting our babies even in those privatized institutions become more harmful, right? Because it's really for them to navigate how to assimilate to this world that is white dominant. You go into some of these charter schools, you go into some of these private schools, and you get police for being expressive, or you get police for the way that you talk, you know, or your hair, or you have to dress a certain way, or you can't have locks, or you can't have braids. You know, you got to come in a suit and tie. You got to come in with certain boots. You know, I remember going in for a shadow for one of my projects for school. And I remember the principal literally yelling, I want to say at like a first grader, she had boots on. It was snowing outside. She had boots on with her full uniform, beautiful little girl. Principal yelling, like that's the one thing that you notice about this beautiful girl in your building. You're noticing her boots. You know, so sometimes I hear what you're saying, because what we really want, and I sort of had to navigate that game too, is that we want access. And right now the access in terms of our community is not where it should be. You know, we see that funding also is reinforced, or money is given when students are tracked, you know, and we see disproportionately that Black, Latinx students are the ones that are going into special education, because the way that the system is set up is that that's a way that they can provide resources is through tracking. So if you are in this track, right, of special education, you're going to need services. So these are the resources that you are going to be, you know, afforded, right? But even there, you're under resourced in terms of schools. But I see more as a system versus privatized education and the state of education as far as public school, right? We just need the ability to access excellence for all of our students, and for students to access curriculum that is grounded in love, right? If people loved us in our greatness and in our magic, kids would have access to all of these things that we want for them. But the way that schooling institutions are run is that love is conditional. Love is conditional to your assimilation to whiteness, or to your approximation to whiteness. If you articulate yourself in this way, okay, your life matters. But
Right.
if you articulate yourself like this, you know what I'm saying? Your life doesn't matter. You know, and even those stereotypes, right? Like of who is worthy and who is not, of whose hair is worthy, of who is not. Sometimes you walk into buildings and you see like behavior codes and you're like, what's going on with that?
Right.
You know, and there's a lot of anti-blackness in our schools, and that's what's really at the state of why we see what's happening and why the numbers have not changed in terms of disproportionality for our babies. And if I have 2 kids and if I can help it and be a vessel of speaking truth to power in any spaces that I'm in, you know, that's my charge right now.
So like, again, because it's true, you know what I mean? Like you said, we want access. We want our children to have the best opportunities. We don't see them here in our community. We don't really know how to get access to it. It's a numbers game, especially in charter schools in Harlem. It's a numbers game. We need to get as many kids as we can get. Are they getting the best education? I mean, how do we know that? How do we know? So
Well, we
what's
know that the education that they get is based on how the system is set up. You know, right now, again, schooling institutions are standardized. So students are getting a standardized education. So the education mirrors what is the end goal. You know, the end goal is that by the 3rd grade, students have to take a state test. 4th grade, they have to take a state test. You know, if you want to go to a quote unquote good school or a school with access to a specialized high school, you know that there's a specialized test for that too. So there are a lot of barriers that are created intentionally, right? To keep that access out. But for me, it's at the systems level. The more that I'm understanding more about schooling as an institution, because I would argue that education is everywhere.
We have some questions here. Let me see what some of these questions are. I'm gonna read. We have like a question. So, what are your thoughts on school centered in Blackness pre-college?
Pre-college.
I guess like pre-college, before college. Like, what are your thoughts on school centered in Blackness, like before college?
Well, I don't think I was, like I said before, like, you know, in terms of my process and really examining my own whiteness and how white supremacy culture lived within me. I think I would have probably had a colonized answer. Like, no, you know, we need to go to a school that tells us to be X, Y, and Z. And, you know, because at that point, I didn't have that level of awareness, you know, to understand, you know, what even centering schooling and education with our Blackness meant. I don't think I had enough knowledge of that to even think about it, but have a colonized mind and say, like, no, like, I want to go to a predominantly white school, or I want to go to private schools because this is what gets you, you know, to the highest level, you know, where now.
Do you believe that the institutions, the schooling institutions right now, basically grooming our kids to
Absolutely.
Grooming our children to basically navigate through white America?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, our ancestor said it best. He said Carter G. Woodson said the Negro's mind has been brought under the control of his oppressor, right? So that is what schooling institutions have been in terms of our curriculum, in terms of the histories that we learn, in terms of the conditioning that happens, even so much so that we end up believing the criminalization of our own people. Like, you needed to work harder. You needed to, like, why, if I made it, you could have done it, you know, and not really understanding that the system is designed to destroy us. It's not designed to uplift us. It's intentional in the ways in which it was created, right? You know, for me, you know, I've had to go through, I am where I am in education, and I'm just so grateful for so many people that have just nourished me and provided access. But this shit was work, you know, in terms of me taking even my own certification test that was standardized. I can't tell you how many of them I failed, you know, and oftentimes I felt like a failure because I could not pass this specific test, right? But no standardized test is a mirror to my brilliance, right? I just finished taking the GREs because I want to, you know, get my doctorate.
Right.
And going through that 4-hour process of a GRE was so infuriating because in my mind, I'm like, what year are we in? Why do I have to take this test for it to provide access for me to go to higher education? Not only to take this test, but there's also money. I had to pay for the test. So if I didn't have both, or I don't do well, and I didn't do well, you know, and that's okay, because I know that that test does not define me, just like every other test did not define me in terms of SATs and all of that. Like it's just yes to that question.
So again, so what do we do to revamp that? What do we do? What steps do we take in order to,
I think
to get this right?
So as educators, I think there's different places, right? So you can be an educator in this space. You can be a parent in this space. You could be a friend in this space, an aunt, uncle, whoever is in this live and your influence, right? If you're an educator, you need to start examining or doing the work of what is whiteness? What is white supremacy culture? Right? And how is that showing up in terms of the policies or practices that I'm reinforcing in my school or in my classroom, right? Am I centering students' identity, right? And am I centering the collective, right? Am I really thinking about ways that students are talking about what's going on in the world? Were students talking about Breonna Taylor? Were students talking about George Floyd? Or were teachers getting in trouble because they were talking about Breonna Taylor? You know, some teachers can't even say Black Lives Matter and are in schools. Schools are 80% white women that are in our educational system. Only, I believe the statistic is only 7% of us, you know, Black educators in schooling institutions right now. I think as parents, we have to be vigilant. You know, I am hyper vigilant with my kids of anything that I feel like is anti-Black in schools, you know, and I'm that parent. Like I literally just had a conversation with my daughter's first grade teacher. They have a certain curriculum and she got 2 points off. And I'm like, why? And she's like, oh, I don't know what to tell you. That's the way that we grade. Well, the way that you grade is some bullshit. So is this something that I need to escalate to the principal? Because one, is not in the directions.
Right.
And two, you're teaching she knows the content. It shouldn't matter that she didn't take the test in a specific way if she knows what you are teaching her. So I think that we just have to be, as parents, specifically as Black parents, specifically if you're in a marginalized or in a minoritized group, you have to be vigilant on how your students are being educated. You know, I went to an open house, another example, and my son was taking American history or something like that. And I was I think the only Black person in that, you know, they have it for different grades and different times, you know, in the classroom. And I was like, from whose perspective are you teaching this history? Are we teaching the real truth about American history? And everyone's just you know, then it's like
flabbergasted. Everybody said, like, I just wanted to be very clear.
And you know what? And it's uncomfortable for me too, because when you're in a sea of whiteness, right? You're surrounded by violence, right? You're surrounded by dominance. So you have to create those brave spaces where you are sort of speaking truth to power about, are we going to talk about the counter narrative? You know, and I've heard like, oh, you know, my wife's, you know, great grandfather was Native American. You start to hear those things, which end up being so funny. Really? But you have to be hyper vigilant.
Be like, really, Native American? How?
Right.
Sorry.
And I think if you're a sister, I think if you're an aunt, I think if you're a brother, and any sort of influence, I think the work starts with us really investigating like how white supremacy culture has really done a number on us. You know, from the way that whiteness creates white violence for us. So we move in the world of surviving, surviving to assimilate, right, to this proximity that we know we will never get to, right? So I'm done doing that because I know that we are magic. I know that we are brilliant. And I thank Dr. Goldie Muhammad, you know, her book, Cultivating Genius, and understanding the work of our ancestors in the 1800s, of literary societies and curriculums and all of this beautiful, rich history that I did not know, you know, because we as educators, we have this training with white theorists and, you know, white standards, and these are the books that you should read. And that is just such a falsehood to try to eradicate our culture and just our brilliance and just like us being everything.
Right. Wow. Oh gosh, Jesus Christ. We have so much work to do. You know what I mean? There's so much more work that we have to do. And I mean, we need more people like you out here advocating for, you know, our culture, advocating for our babies in the school systems, advocating for Black women. Like, just need to, I mean, where do we start? I mean, I guess we can start right here, right? Any point is a start.
And listen to Black women, period. You know, like, listen to Black women. You know, I've had to listen to Black women, and Black women are such a beautiful community. And I had that at BC, I had that at Lehman, I had that at Columbia. It's always been the community. It's always been that affinity that has really nourished me and really lifted me in times when we were all trying to survive.
Right.
You know, I think that you come into spaces and we are conditioned and socialized to believe that we can do it alone. But I have not done this work alone. Right. You know, I have not. I couldn't have gotten through all that I have gotten through if it were not for all the amazing, brilliant, genius Black women in my life. You know, from Zakia, from Tiffany, from Crystal. You know, when I got my master's, you know, one of my best friends, Josette. You know, we went to spa together, and when times would get tough, it's like, okay, we need to regroup.
It's the sisterhood that carries us through those tough times. It's definitely the sisterhood that carries us through, that helps us see the light at the end of the tunnel all the time.
Absolutely. And to the white folks, you know, I don't know if there's any white folks in this live, but, you know, if you have a level of...
My show is centered around Black people. My show is centered specifically around us. It's for us, it's by us, it's only about us, and it's for us to continue to be educated. And my whole purpose is to have people within our community that are in different fields, in different jobs, not just your regular rapper, not just your regular athlete, people in different fields, different career choices coming in to educate everybody on what it is that they do. Because we can't sit up here and say, buy Black, buy Black. We need to also know the Blacks that we're going ahead and supporting. So it's only us.
And I appreciate you, sis. I appreciate you for providing the access for me to speak truth to power. Right. You know, this is my experience. You know, this is where I am today. I don't know it all, you know, but I think that for all of us on this live, for me, the eruptiousness of my consciousness in terms of understanding how my anti-Blackness even manifested as me as a teacher, even though I think I did a phenomenal job in the classroom, because there was always a sense of community with my kids because my kids look like me. So that was always something very special to me. I always wanted them to feel seen. I always wanted them to feel heard. I always wanted them to feel valued. But I was socialized in a way that I know I'm sure I caused harm. You know, but it's not too late if you're in education. It's not too late if you're a parent, you know, to really do the work of starting to understand, like, how have I been socialized? You know, how have I been colonized? You know, when can I say Black Lives Matter? Is it when somebody is compliant or not? Because that's anti-Black. You know, is it when somebody's speaking articulately with a special articulation? or somebody is speaking a different way, well, we need to examine that, right? I think that we have to start with really thinking about how are we going to love our full selves without conditions, right? And that's the way to start, that we love ourselves in our wholeness. And that's my hope in education. That's my hope, hopefully, that I consider myself a researcher as well. But Bell Hooks talks about love, you know, and it's the commitment to another person's spiritual growth. Isn't that beautiful? Like, if I'm committed to your growth, like, that's me showing you love, care, responsibility, and having that commitment.
Right.
That's the commitment that we need to have to our babies, that no level of conditioning about what they wear, about how they talk, about, you know, how they read, about the standards. Those are conditions as that you've placed to love me. We got to remove those conditions and really start to love our students in their wholeness. So that we can start to change some of the policies and the structures that we currently see in schooling institutions, so that they can become educational spaces where students feel free. Like I felt in Columbia, you know, a professor to tell me, you belong here. I remember that.
Right.
I remember on the first day of Columbia, and shout out to my bestie Josette, who's in the live. I literally came home at almost 3 a.m. and I was crying. And my mom goes to me, oh my God, I hope I don't get emotional on this live. No, girl. And she was like, listen, if you can't do it, like, it's okay. We're going to be proud of you anyway. Like, I literally almost quit on my first day. And thinking about what that professor said, and the way he says, like, you all belong here, like you have something of worth for this institution. That was when I started to really understand that I was the magic in the space. The space was not the magic. Look at my boozy. Come on, girl.
Go ahead. Well, where can everyone else, because I know how to find you, but where can everyone else find you and continue to follow you and continue to support you on your, because you're on a mission. You're on a mission.
Yes.
So
my mission for all of us is liberation, and that's liberation of the mind.
Right.
So I'm often, you know, asking a lot of the tough questions, and you all can find me on Instagram, jotty.mercedes. Right here, you know, I'm often posing prompts and asking y'all if y'all ready for this talk. Hopefully this will be the first of many. And you know, DM me with questions, or, you know, whatever supports you guys are working through. I really appreciate you for providing this space for me and allowing, you know.
Come on. Thank you for wanting to come on. Thank you, because I know everybody listen. My whole goal was, listen, if I can get 4 or 5 people to lock into the conversation to follow you, you just gain 4 or 5 more supporters. And I've been doing good, you know, since I started this. I can't think of anyone that's come on this show, whether they've been selling a product, speaking, anything. 4 or 5 people from here have continued to follow those people, continue to follow their journey, continue to get to know who they are and to support what it is that they're doing. So,
and sis, that's access. You said, how can we do the work? And you're doing the work. So we appreciate you. You are fabulous. I want to say that. And I want to say, you know, shout out to everybody on the live, but also like shout out to all the Black women in this work, especially when it comes to the work of racial equity, because we have a heavy load that we carry. And I see you, I'm with you, and even Black women in predominantly white spaces that could become very violent, you know, if we don't walk or talk in a specific, in a particular way. Just know that, you know, I see you, I'm with you, and, you know, every day we just gotta, you know, just fight a little harder.
So I want you just to leave us with a gem before you leave us, because you are no longer Yaribel, you are Yaribel, right? Let's get this together.
I appreciate you, sis. I appreciate you.
We denounce Yaribel. It's no more Yaribel. It's Yaribel. Come on, girl. Leave us with a good one.
I appreciate you, sis. I appreciate you, sis. I think my gem, I'm going to leave you all with truly believe in your genius and your magic. You know, I went too long insecure about my skill set, insecure about my brilliance, because I was comparing it to something that's incomparable. I was comparing it to something that's mediocre. And, you know, I just want everybody to know that you are magic. You are brilliant. Stop doubting yourself. When that doubt shows up, just know that their mediocrity, you know, that your best, even like your mediocrity is their best. And I think that that's what I want to leave everybody with, because I can't tell you the times that I hear so many people talking about imposter syndrome or the ways in which we're insecure in particular spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, we're the magic, and that magic is threatening.
Yep.
So we got to keep showing up and showing out.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. I definitely do appreciate it. When Z hit me up, she was like, my homegirl want to come on. I was like, well, tell her come on. I hit you up like, what day can you be available? Send me a picture. Let's go ahead and let's get this on the roll. You came with a, listen, I want to talk about this and I want to talk about this. If you want to come on the show, if you got a list of what you want to talk about, then we can go ahead and do it. It makes my job a lot easier, but definitely this was very informative, very educational.
And I love your babies. Let me tell you.
Thank you.
That baby, he knows how to read. So if a teacher ever tells you that he is not reading, you tell her, listen, sis, my baby been reading me for a long time. I love that baby.
I think that's another thing. Please know your children. Know your children.
Yes.
And advocate for your children. In every space that you can, advocate for your children. Be on top of their schoolwork. Be on top of what it is that they're learning. Like you said, you have to be on top of it. Please don't pass your kids off to these teachers' care and think that it's okay. If my daughter gets a low grade, that teacher hits me, I'm like, okay, so we've been emailing you since, I don't know, we haven't got any reply back. What's going on here? Oh, we're really sorry. It was a mistake. I was like, oh, okay, no problem.
Right, vigilance.
No problem.
Right.
We're serious about the schoolwork. We're not half-assing it. My daughter's been in the house for a year going to school online. It has not been easy. It has not.
Listen, the struggle is real.
Yes.
You know, and I think teachers are going through it. You know, then that it's just a lot on everybody, and also understanding the difficulties. But yes, we have to be, you know, vigilant. We have to know our babies, and we have to love without conditions. And especially conditions that are rooted in whiteness and white supremacy, like, bye.
Well, I definitely do appreciate you for coming on. Everybody, make sure you guys
I appreciate you, sis. I love you, sis. Keep shining, girl.
I will be sending this to you. This is definitely going to be a goodie, okay? I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, guys. For tuning in.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
I love y'all.